Well, welcome everybody to this webinar on the technical challenges of delivering a broadcast live experience to any device, anywhere in the world. Quite a challenge, you'd think, but we're delighted to say that we have three guests with us today who are all experts in that field. Jason Thibeault, first of all, joins us from Texas. Jason, thanks very much indeed for joining us today, the Executive Director of the Streaming Video Alliance. You're very welcome. Christof Haslauer is here. Christof is the co-founder and Chief Technical Officer of NativeWaves. And welcome to you too, Christof, joining us from Germany today, and also from the States, Caleb Weinstein, based in California, and Caleb is the Director of Sport, Media and Entertainment for Google Cloud. So thank you very much, all of you, for joining us. Jason, perhaps if we start with you in your role as the Executive Director of the Streaming Video Alliance, delivering that broadcast live experience really goes hand in hand with the word streaming, and for various reasons during 2020, streaming has seen a massive boom in its significance and the delivery of new opportunities. Is that your experience too?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's the biggest thing we've seen is, streaming was already growing. There was already, call it an evolution happening between broadcast and streaming. Many broadcasters were looking at ways to leverage OTT delivery, even beyond IPTV, to appeal to their subscribers' demand for wanting to watch their content, wherever they were, wherever they were at. And to be honest, it's cheaper, right? It's cheaper to deliver streaming than it is to deliver broadcast, and getting fiber into new places and things like that. So it's we've seen that already happening, and the pandemic year it exploded. It was exponential growth. Broadcasters were already preparing for sort of longitudinal growth. Like they had plans for scaling and building out infrastructure and creating cloud and using partners like GCP, like Google Cloud Platform, to sort of enable that. But all of a sudden, what they were planning for 18 months down the road happened in like 2 months. And so, that forced them to react very swiftly. And I think what we saw is a lot of these broadcasters, they didn't fall down. They were able to adapt, albeit with a little bit of growing pains, but they were able to do so quite well. And so, I think a lot of what we thought were going to be really big challenges, ended up being challenges, but they've already had the processes and the plans in place to resolve them. It was just a matter of accelerating those plans.
Christof, moving to you on that, really, NativeWaves has found a market, and as you say, it really has been perhaps exponential growth for you during 2020 in delivering your services. Is Jason's experience been yours as well?
Yes, absolutely. So there is like a tremendous requests also like to deliver new experiences, because like I think it just accelerated also the ideas in those companies. So there were probably some people that said, oh yeah, our existing broadcast service is good enough, but now they saw also the needs to change something. And there's also like some time was last year for innovations, like to think about the existing solutions and also think and refocus to what's really important and how it's going to lay out in the coming years.
Thanks, Christof. Caleb, again, from the Google Cloud perspective, I mean, obviously you're in the market really sort of looking at ways, looking at partnering with organizations. Again, it must have been a very busy year for you, 2020.
Yeah, I think you heard from the market, the technology is there. And I think what we heard from basically end users is that they had put a lot of things into their 2020 budget. And, as a unconstrained item that they were hoping to do, they were initially told, no, let's not do it this year. There's not the need. And then all those things they put into 2020 budget have now popped up as being activated, because the demand, the need, people don't want to sit 20 people crammed into an OBS truck sitting outside a venue. They want to grab remote. And I think what we're really seeing across the industry is, I definitely heard examples of people having teams who spent 40 weeks a year on the road and didn't have home internet. So this switch has been quite a revolution, because they were always in the truck. They didn't need a 250 megabyte connection at home. And so I think we're seeing a huge adjustment and a lot of things of what people wanted to do, that it's been a huge tragedy of the pandemic, but the pandemic has kind of pushed the industry to move forward, to adapt to the new conditions it has to work within.
Yeah,
and Jason, yeah,
can I add to
Jason.
that? Yeah, so that's really interesting. I actually moderated a panel at another event earlier this week where we had Fox Sports and the NFL on there talking about sort of remote production in the cloud. And there has been some tremendous innovation at the broadcaster level about sort of how do we enable, studio quality production to happen remotely. Like, what are the technologies? What do we put in the cloud from our traditional broadcast? Can we put our control center in there? And watching that sort of innovation is exactly what, Caleb had said. The budget was there to try some of the things out. And now it was, okay, we need to make this happen immediately. And the really cool part was they had, I asked them a question sort of like, well, is this going to stay? And they're like, absolutely. Like, this has become part of the toolbox now, this, how we do remote production. Why do we need people to travel around all the time? I don't think we do.
I mean, I can't. So I was just going to say, I agree with you profusely. Like, I mean, I started in this business in 1992 carrying tapes, as a summer internship. Like, that's what I started doing. Now, the tapes are largely gone in the finished production world, not completely, largely, but the processes are all the same. And I think what we're now seeing is that the technology has been there, and now, particularly for sport, which frankly is such high value content, is still a very artisanal, frankly, practice in the live production, is now been pushed into this world through the pandemic. And I think we're going to see a lot of innovation, here to stay. I think the challenge, as we're seeing from this panel, is we're an industry of standards, but no standardization. And so interoperability and how quickly we'll see it spread across the media industry, and having been someone who grew up in multiple parts of the media industry where each had their own media factory, I think is going to be the question. And how we get to that interoperability and that widespread adoption will be the next stage to really be to overcome the challenges around that.
That's a really good point, Caleb, and it plays to what you were saying to me earlier, Jason, about going back to the Streaming Video Alliance, that you've just recently had 20 new members. That in terms of this growth and that great line that was just mentioned there about industry of standards but no standardization. The growth means potentially going in so many different directions.
Well, I mean, and that was when streaming first really hit, right? When it really started to gain some momentum, as a revenue generating opportunity, people were doing whatever they could to make things work. It was bubblegum and duct tape. Like, I mean, there was no guidance. And the problem was, like, if you want to set up a television station, you have, 30 plus years of, like, in the US at least, 30 plus years of standards. Like, you have to implement a certain way. You have equipment that's all interoperable. It all connects together. You're good to go. Streaming wasn't like that. And the problem with standards and streaming, though, is that the technology in streaming is still moving quickly. And so standards take, 2 to 3 years to ratify. And suddenly you're behind the curve by the time the standard comes out. So organizations like ours, we focus on best practices, guidelines, specs, functional requirements, to remain agile, to give people in the industry guidance. Like, that's what they need. They need guidance in order to get people to work together. So our organization represents the video ecosystem, right? We have network operators, service providers, content owners, and technology companies that all sit down at the table together, and we get competitors, across the table from each other, talking about how do we do things in a way so that everyone can adopt regardless of the underlying technology solution. And it's worked really well. We had actually 5 publications this year. And we give all our publications away, right? They get ratified by membership and then they are given to the industry. And so, to Caleb's point, it's, interoperability, the I word, right? That's what we focus on. We want to make sure that people can choose whatever technology they want and snap it into their workflow. And it works because it's all built with the same premise of exchanging data between each others and exchanging functionality and interoperability with, programmatic interfaces and things like that. So yes, definitely what Caleb says, absolutely a huge challenge.
Well, I know, Jason, you're a man of many talents because you've also patented many examples of new technologies in streaming. We'll come back to some of those perhaps, but let's just focus with Christopher on one particular way forward. And we've mentioned NativeWaves, the business that you co-founded 4 years ago now. Christof, give us a bit of an idea for the people watching into this about what it is that NativeWaves does and how that's been received by your customers.
Yeah, so NativeWaves is really all about delivering like engaging and personalized live media experience. So we want to work with our partners, like be it broadcasters, event providers, to bring like these next level experiences also to the consumer. And maybe quickly to add like on Jason's point, because I totally agree, and I also like what we see with the standards is, for example, especially in the area of streaming and especially in ultra latency streaming. So because what we do is basically we also offer additional content streams to a broadcast feed, maybe on a second screen device, and then we synchronize them together. And for that to be available, we need to reach like very low latencies, because normally what you get in TV, you have like 3 to 10 seconds, depending on if you're on cable or satellite. And OTT streams are normally like 30 seconds to a minute. So actually to be able to deliver those streams like in synchronicity with the TV, you need to be faster than 3 seconds. So there's also like a lot was going into like the low latency streaming, and there are standards for it now, at least emerging ones. But you also need like all those components in the full streaming chain to work together. So it goes over the encoder, over like your streaming platform, over your CDN, and then back to the player. Like the player also plays a key role in there, and if it doesn't support the standards correctly, then you have like a latency in there. So there's a lot of components and a lot of companies that need to work together and then like use a specific standards.
And you've been working with the Bundesliga, I think, haven't you, this year as well? You know, in terms of delivering live sports events, has that gone down well with the public and the customers?
So we are not working with Bundesliga, but we are definitely watching them, because they release now like also like you have access to all these cool content feeds available, and we are looking at multiple sports leagues. So for example, we're looking everywhere, like at every live event where we can enhance the user experience and moving beyond the single feed what you normally get in broadcast. So we look an event and see like what cameras are in the stadium available, what data is available, and how we can like package those together and bring them to consumer again. And like from the request, it was actually a really good year, like from this perspective. Of course, like pandemic and so not so much, but like overall there was like a huge interest to like how can we utilize what's available and create experiences that have never been seen before, basically.
Christof, thank you. My apologies for that, but as you say, it's about pulling together all the different opportunities that are out there, aren't they? Caleb, just coming back to you, if I may. I mean, just looking through your CV, it's impressive to say the least, working in terms of the range of people that you've worked for in the sector, for whom this is of significance now: Viacom, Warner Brothers, Discovery, Eurosport, Amazon, and Fox Sport. The list goes on. You've got a very good platform from which to give us your take on how this is developing, but also what those challenges are. I mean, this particular webinar, we want to look at the challenges of delivering to multiple devices and anywhere in the world. I mean, what do you see as the biggest challenges to what we've heard from Jason and Christof that they're involved in delivering?
So I think I've spent most of my career launching media platforms around the world, and now I think, as we all know, and the subject of this conversation, legacy linear television, that value, and the consumer is shifting to streaming. The consumer is moving that way, and the media industry needs to adapt to that. And I think the question is how, as Jason pointed out, is that everything is moving probably 10, if not 100 times faster than it did, frankly, 30 years ago when pay TV or TV went digital from a technical perspective. So everything is moving 30 times faster. And so I think the issues we need to be focusing on from an industry perspective is how do we efficiently and effectively test and experiment. And frankly, that's what brought me to Google Cloud, is that ability. I think what's so magical about the cloud is the ability to spin up architectures and a solution set and then spin it down. And I think that's particularly important in sports, where you look at somebody who broadcasts the NFL on Sunday. CBS and Fox, they're running 16 regional games usually, and so that means they have to have 16 channels, where the rest of the week they're running one channel. And I think the cloud, whether it's for legacy or for OTT, can spin up and expand and scale back to meet the needs of the content. And I think that's that ability to scale up and scale down and experiment is what's going to really drive the next wave of the industry. And it doesn't always, I spent most of my career that the first thing we had to understand was, could we afford the initial CapEx investment, whether that was a satellite transponder or actually building a building in the non-sports space for studios. Did you have enough of a business opportunity to get over a material CapEx investment? And I think the cloud and technology is going to alleviate that dependency, which will then put more money into the screen and saying, hey, we can afford to have 30 cameras for this event versus 5 or 6, and to deliver a much higher quality of production that engages with fans. And I'll close on this point that I as you say, I've worked in many places in my career. I've been fortunate enough to see lots of different business models. I find it interesting, I'll say, in the British sense, that there are 50 different versions of Discovery Channel around the world, or MTV has 50 different versions that cater to the local audiences. But when you're watching a sporting event, if you're lucky, there are 3 versions. There's the home version, the away version, and a clean feed or a neutral feed or a world feed. But people who are watching golf in Japan are seeing the same perspective that a UK or US audience is going on when there are a propensity of Japanese players on the tour. And I think golf from a sports perspective is fascinating because it's 18 games going on at once, and how you cover that, and how do we basically localize that sport coverage for each of the audiences. I think there are 128 players, and I'll close on this. I think there are 128 players in the NBA from outside the United States. How does the NBA show versions of those games that focus on those players for home audiences versus the basic feed they would normally provide?
And actually,
that's very point.
There's a very interesting technical challenge there. So it's something you said, Caleb, around spinning up infrastructure. Totally agreed, right? The whole concept of Docker and containers, the ability to sort of create an instance of something and then get rid of it is hugely cheaper than like going out and buying a control center panel and testing it out and realizing this didn't work. But something about that, there's still a challenge there. And I think the challenge comes as broadcasters move heavier portions of their workflow, like a control room, into the cloud. They might require a very specific instance, like let's say, they need the largest instance available, right, with the most compute and the most memory. But in order to get that instance, they have to put in a reservation for it. So the one thing they don't want to do is, the day before the show, somebody's like, okay, so are we ready to test out the control room? And the guy's like, no, sorry, there were no instances available. And so that's something obviously that will, fix itself probably over time as, like cloud platform providers like Google and Amazon continue to expand out their own infrastructure. But there are limitations, right? And that's a challenge that broadcasters need to keep in mind, especially for sports, as again, those heavier processing functions need to move to the cloud. You can spin them up, but sometimes the infrastructure may not be there yet to support them unless you've made that reservation well in advance.
Christof, what have you come across in those areas?
Yeah, maybe quickly to add there, like, for example, our company wouldn't exist without cloud, basically, because like we are a small company, right? So we don't have that much finance power to just like invest in a server farm, right? But if you think about it, if you have like a sports event and if you're doing stuff like we do, where you have like multiple cameras available, and think about the motor race, then you have like 20 drivers and you have 20 drivers cam and then a helicopter and everything else, then you need to scale really, really fast. And like for like in just minutes, right? So for example, you have an event and it's just like 1 or 2 hours, and before you have no traffic, and then it hits, and it could be like 1 million viewers, right, at the same time. So and we need them to be ready for this, and this is only really like be feasible with cloud solutions there. So and there, of course, it's also because broadcasters have their existing infrastructure, so we spend a lot of time thinking about how we can ease the integration to their existing systems, right? So like, how do we get the feeds? How do we get their existing data infrastructure, their scaling system, everything connected to our cloud services so that it's actually fully automated process, because otherwise you couldn't handle like 10 events per day or something, right?
Caleb, what are your thoughts on that?
Sure. Hey, I think the reservation issue can get addressed very quickly. I mean, it's frankly it's as Jason says, it's really kind of coming at this in a holistic way. You know, and it's I often say to people when we look at cost benefit analysis between on-prem and the cloud, is you can't just calculate the server cost that's sitting in the building. You have to look at the cost of the building. You have to look at the cost of not just the 45 techs you have running those servers. You also have to think about the security guard who mans the building. You have to think about the HR resources. And I think it's really an education issue as really kind of embracing what the cloud has to offer. And I think, frankly, the reservation issues on a material scale have already been worked out. It's not something I've run into. It's when people are trying to, frankly, test something and are setting API call limits to manage their budget. They're kind of constraining themselves, and we see this happening, frankly, at the top media companies still today. It's people are putting in, I think, constraints on the work they're doing is when we run into challenges, and it's really about an education on the cloud, and that's just that's just people getting more familiar with the operating processes of the cloud.
What do you think, Caleb, then is the potential of the cloud? Because as you say, you're out there sort of selling it. And in terms of new people coming on board, they're often not familiar with how it all works and what's required. I mean, what do you think is the potential looking, say, 10 years ahead in terms of Christof and companies like his, for example? Where will the cloud still be able to service them? Christof was saying his company perhaps wouldn't operate without the cloud. It's a huge potential growth area for you.
I think a great example to talk about is Mlb Film Room, which launched in September and is built on an infrastructure from Google Cloud Platform, where basically we're not only connected to the servers that sit in all 30 ballparks in baseball, but we've connected that to the cloud and to running media workflows for MLB that come out and deliver every at-bat in baseball. So basically, if you're not familiar with Film Room, I recommend everybody go check it out. It's mlbfilmroom.com. And it is basically let's call it the short form or highlight library for baseball. And they've got over 3.5 million clips in this library today. They've got clips going as far back as 1929, but the real kind of going forward purpose of the library is to capture and clip every at bat in baseball, which is over 160,000 a season, and they're doing this automatically with minimal, human involvement. So basically, using machine learning-based cameras, they're capturing the data of the play that's going on, and then they're capturing the video, and they're clipping the video, as I say, automatically on an infrastructure built on Google Cloud, and then they're attaching metadata to it that enables natural language processing. So you can sort, if you just want to see, I mean, I'll tell you, my thing is bunts, and you can watch foul bunts in baseball. There are roughly, I think, 5,800 bunts in the library. There are 223 from the New York Yankees and 439 from the LA Dodgers. So you as a consumer can, I think, evolve from consuming content by a team, which is, I think how most of us grew up, to, let's say, you're really into bunts, or you're really into plays at shortstop, or you're really into home runs. You can now start to consume content that way because MLB has put all their data on a unified data plane on Google Cloud Platform. So all of the play and performance tracking is sitting on the same data plane as the video, and as well as, frankly, all the enterprise sales that's going on in the venue. So that's enabling, I would say, MLB to engage with the fans much in the same way that Sky engages with their subscribers. And so they have all this data about who you are as a viewer, as a fan, and the heuristics of what you want to see, and they're attaching that to the real-time play data and the videos that are coming out. So you're getting personalized content for you for the sport. And I think that's, frankly, as I say, I think the goal of sports is to expand and to continue growing its reach. And I think technology is going to help translate that sport to new audiences around the world.
And that, let me add to that. So that brings up an interesting challenge, because that's an awesome product from Major League Baseball. But when you think about, sort of other sports leagues, and you start talking about traditional broadcasts where the MAM is very important, right? The media asset manager. There are not really MAMs that are cloud-based yet, right? So they will come, yes, but, Major League Baseball built their own, right? And so the challenge there is thinking about, from a traditional sports broadcaster, like, okay, how do I get all of my clips organized, from my traditional MAM into the cloud? And then one of the challenges, like, what kind of metadata do I attach to these things in order to make them relevant to viewers, right? So that requires a whole, really sit down, figure it out kind of exercise. So I think, what Caleb is saying is totally true. Like, the cloud, it just enables so many awesome features now. Every one of our members, for example, a lot of our bigger members, Disney, Charter, Comcast, right? They're all GCP users, they're all Google Cloud Platform users, right? They understand that. And of course they use AWS as well, but they use the cloud and it's there, but it introduces new challenges, and they're not bad challenges, they're just challenges. So I wouldn't want a sports league, let's say, EPL, to be like, okay, that sounds really great, I was watching this webinar, let's go do that. And it's like, well, no. That's going to take you a lot more work than just saying, let's use the cloud. It's now, how does the use of the cloud for that, enabling that kind of functionality, how does it impact us as a business? What do we have to do to even make that possible? And so I think that, Caleb using that example is awesome. That's an example that every sports league should be looking to. How do we do that? And figuring out, and maybe it is, back to Caleb's point, just an educational issue. We need to educate the industry. How do you make these things like that happen? But it's really cool. That Major League Baseball, it's an awesome thing to go see.
And thank you, Jason. I'll just add, you talked about Fox Sports earlier. We did an announcement in July with Fox Sports where we're that MAM technology, we're innovating with them to put that into the cloud. And I think the thing is, we're not just placing metadata, but the platform we're working on with Fox Sports is using ML to always dynamically be updating your metadata. So things you could not, let's talk about, I guess, the tuck rule in American football was the play that drove Tom Brady to the legacy that he is. That rule doesn't exist anymore. And as the sports evolve, we're using technology to empower broadcasters and OTT providers to create stories by having a dynamic ability to be constantly updating their library, not just with content, but with characteristics and metadata that they may be looking for.
Yeah, and I think it's also changing to a more individual experience. So for example, at the moment, broadcast just pushing one stream out to consume for all, right? But if you think about it, also for different sports and so on, there are also different assets and different experiences user want to consume, right? So it's also going I want to see my athlete more, or I want to see clips of my specific athlete, or I want to follow him the full game, right? So it's a lot of the broadcasters also need to rethink the way how they handled stuff previously and how they can incorporate new technologies. Because in the end, it only what the experience what counts, right? The technology should be basically invisible. It should be how you can create a meaningful experience, and technology is about how the way to deliver it, but it shouldn't impact the user like it is now. And at the moment, it's just okay, we have this technical limitation, so we can only show you this. But now it's moving more and more to the way okay, what do we want to deliver? And then how do we make that available with technology? And also, of course, cloud supporting this situation.
Jason, you've got, we mentioned before, your experience as an inventor, but it strikes me that, it's going to be important in terms of the technology companies and those that develop devices and ways of receiving all of this entertainment and sport through streaming. It's important that they're sort of linked into this, isn't it, really? Because otherwise you've got this fantastic resource that is streaming, but actually, do you have to be very careful about how it gets out, how it's used, and making sure that there's the right devices out there for it to be used to the best effect?
Yeah, I mean, device fragmentation is probably one of the bigger challenges to, let me take a step back. So, live sports especially, their biggest concern is, scalability, right? So we need to be able to deliver our stream now to lots of people outside of the network we were delivering it on. Reliability, right? So the stream can't buffer, it can't drop. Our ABR ladder has to be consistent. We can't have one bit rate bomb, so reliability is an issue. And then consistency, right? We don't want to switch bit rates a lot, right? We want to make sure the bit rates are kind of the same consistently for a user and that they're a high enough level. And then you toss in devices on that. So all these devices, they do have, in a sense, uniform players, but they might all implement those players in different ways. So now you've got to deliver, a certain package and a certain stream to iOS devices, and a certain package and a certain stream to Android devices, or to Roku connected TVs, or to Amazon Fire Sticks, or to connected TVs in general. So somebody may be watching on their app on their Samsung. That creates a lot of issues, especially when you want to standardize on things like HTML5 as a player. That's a huge challenge, and for that scalability, right? I need to scale. Now my workflow, where in broadcast, my workflow was very simple. I had one stream going out as a multicast stream, and I'm good, I'm done. Now you've got unicast streams going everywhere with supporting all of these different devices, and you can't not support them, right? Because if you do, then you alienate some, part of your viewer base. So, kind of jumping on Caleb, Google Cloud Platform, that's what that helps with so much. You can containerize and virtualize all of these aspects of your workflow to get the right transcode, the right package, the right monitoring, where you couldn't necessarily do that from on-prem, right? It's just not an option. And so that's why a lot of these broadcasters, as they look towards streaming, are thinking like, how do I leverage the cloud, right? How do I use the cloud to offload all of this functionality that would require me to have 10 times my current infrastructure physically, in order to support all of these different devices all of the time. When you start to sit down and think about it, it's almost mind-boggling, to solve this kind of challenge. And we're doing it slowly but surely. We're doing it, but it is, device fragmentation. It just adds another layer of complexity onto getting live sports content and linear broadcast television out to a scalable internet audience.
Caleb, what are your thoughts? Because obviously, from the Google Cloud perspective, you've got knowledge across that. Is it important that the technology is certainly there, isn't it? But it has to be used in the right way to get the maximum return.
Sure. I think always we say to, when we work with partners, customers, we say to them, let's make sure we're clear on the intent. Technology can do anything. So I think you have to really make sure, as you're going down this path of conversion, that you have a clear intent and you're getting what you want out of it. And I think that's the number one thing when I work with people, that I always maximize, and just to make sure everyone's clear. Because as I kind of touched on before, I think technology can unlock new ways of working and unlock new ways of thinking about the way you work. And as I touched on earlier, particularly in sports, so much of the infrastructure has been built for peak. It has been built for, can we handle that, like running 8 games at once? Can we handle all of these things? I think the cloud technology can unlock those constraints, and you just have to be clear on what are the, frankly, the intent, the KPIs that you're looking for, and doing that from the onset, because you will have to, or I think you will be embracing a transformational way of thinking about the entire way that you work.
And that's where an organization like the SVA jumps in, right? As we try to provide the documents that give people the best practices to use those technologies effectively, based on what other people have already experienced. And so, again, it's important, especially like when you think of like what Christof, what NativeWaves offers. It's how do you implement these things, in sort of a best practice perspective within your workflow? Like, what's the best way to do this? And so that's where, specs and standards and things like that really come into play, because they give people kind of like a roadmap. Like, how do I solve this challenge of device fragmentation? What's the best way to implement this kind of player using the cloud? It really helps to sort of have that forum, to discuss that, because otherwise you're doing it in a vacuum.
Yeah,
Christof,
and yeah, maybe also quickly to add there, like also like on the end users devices. So there are existing platforms and existing applications already in place. So you have like your iOS app, you have your Android app, you have your web experience, and you have like your smart TV app and so on. And then the question that's like different than also for each broadcaster, right? So everyone has their own. Everything is built a bit differently, and then you need to think about the end user experience that's also different across devices, right? Like it's different from a smart TV to if I just have like a smartphone. And we're there thinking a lot like, okay, first of all, how does it look like the experience from an end user perspective? But then how can we integrate easily? Because it should also, the integration should be fast, right? It should be just plug in. And that's also really a technical challenge what we are trying to solve there to make that also available. And I think it's like, it's not just a TV anymore, but it's like a lot of different devices and also different ways to consume experiences and sports experiences.
And there's a lot of talk around at the moment, isn't there, about second screening and people really, this Generation Z thing of, 18 to 25-year-olds not necessarily consuming sport in the same way as other people have perhaps previous generations have done. Does streaming tap into that? Is that a potential solution for clubs and leagues and sports in general, that they have a way of engaging with a group of people that the evidence would suggest at the moment don't engage in the traditional way?
It definitely, like if you think about, you have your broadcast experience, but then there's, like we spoke before, there's so much more cool content you could deliver to a user, right? And if you're looking at like people's behavior at the moment, they're on their phones while they're watching a football game, right? It's just not there in the broadcast app often, but they're like watching whatever, like they're watching Twitter, they're going like on the web pages, maybe on the league, getting some information out there. And what we're now trying to do is like bundle this information so you have it right at your handheld device. So you're watching experience and then can click through it, and you can easily access the player's data. You can watch past clips from him, how he performed during the season, like get the seasonal stats in, so that you have everything with one click away, basically. So you don't need to leave your playback experience and have kind of a connected playback experience also across multiple devices at the same time.
Jason, your thoughts on that, if you would.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think we've toyed with second screen for quite some time, trying to figure out what the best modality for it is. I mean, we know that, like Christof said, people are watching, they're using their phones, right? I mean, you may be watching something on TV like a football match, and you're on Facebook, and you're looking at your email, and you're on Instagram, and you're on Snapchat, and then you look up to the TV and you're like, oh my gosh, that's cool. Oh, he scores, great, woohoo, yeah. And then you're back to your phone like, oh, that guy's talking again. I hate that announcer. I'm gonna go back to doing what I was doing. We haven't figured out, I think, how to connect those two experiences together. We've been trying, and I think there's a way. I think there's definitely a place for that second screen experience to complement what's happening on another screen, the primary screen. But I think even more interesting are synchronous technologies coming out, like like what Disney Plus has watched with the Watch Together, or Hulu has got this, the idea that you can synchronize watching. So now you could potentially have a sports match going on, and 8 people are watching it on Hulu, and they're actually watching it together. And so then the second screen becomes really interesting because it's all synchronized. I think that's we just haven't figured out a way, like what the right use case is yet for second screen. But to Christof's point, it's there. People have these devices, they're using them. We just need to figure out the way in which they will use them to maximize their engagement with the content that's on the primary screen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially like just quick one there, like for the synchronization part, because like NativeWaves is also a lot about synchronization. And there we also see like they have multiple tries, also like offering multiple streams at the same time to a sports experience. But it's just like bad if you have like they're going over the finish line and it's happening 30 seconds later on your second screen device, right? So now the question is like, how can you synchronize them together? And there are multiple ways, of course, doing it. But like what we are doing at the moment, it's more like this audio synchronization. So we can also easily connect to a live broadcast stream with like listening to the audio and then like matching them together. And together with ultra latency streaming, we then able to actually deliver also live streams faster than TV, so you have everything together. And then of course also like this cool together watching thing that emerged actually also like during the pandemic, right? Because previously you just went to your friend and like watched it together, and now like this is really something where we are looking into, like how can you like connect people and then like also giving them the timeline and everything together on one time scale, like you have it naturally when you're watching the game.
Caleb, it's all about fan engagement, isn't it? I mean, this is different ways of communicating with the audience, but the content has to be there. Is again, I imagine that's something where Google Cloud has a huge role to play. And you mentioned the MLB film book experience, film room experience.
Yeah, no, I think what Jason and Christof have touched on are all very important. The one other area I would bring into this, which isn't as much video, is data integration. And how do you integrate the data into the broadcast of the game? Have the data help craft a story? And to Jason's point, one thing we did last year was with Foxtel, Fox Sports Australia on Foxtel down in Australia, of course, was as they took cricket from broadcast to behind the paywall, we worked with them to develop develop a platform they call Monty the Wicket Predictor. And so what they're doing is they're using data streams through basically our BigQuery analytics platform at Google Cloud and machine learning to predict when a wicket is about to happen in cricket. And what they're doing is, as the propensity for a wicket is rising, they will start basically messaging through mobile, even through the Google Assistant or Google Home platform, as well as through outdoor advertising, telling people to go pay attention to the TV, go turn on the TV, in this day-long cricket match, a wicket is about to happen. And I think that's how they're trying to engage fans in the program. From the broadcast, from the behind the scenes broadcast side, we're starting to work with several sports leagues on frankly automating that process even faster, so that they know what type of play is about to happen, whether it's going to be the change of a bowler or, unfortunately I don't know cricket well enough to kind of cite the examples, but what type of play is going to happen, to know, will there be a 20-second ad break or a 50-second ad break? Because there can be, through a cricket match, a variety of 120 to 240 ad breaks per match. And trafficking for those ad breaks is still being done very manually. So if you have an understanding, even 30 seconds to a minute, of what's about to happen, you can then start, basically doing your ad trafficking more efficiently. And how you bring this, again, it's about, for me, what I spend a lot of time trying to communicate is the more data you have in the same place and you have it synced together, the more you can maximize from that data. And that, I think that is, I think that's what's going to help drive fan engagement. I think, as we all know, as we touched on, the younger generations are looking for more content more quickly. We have a great example of this on YouTube TV. For those of you who haven't seen it, where if you're a subscriber to YouTube TV, this is the virtual MVPD platform in the United States. For American football matches, if you DVR the game, you can then have highlights fed to you. So for somebody such as myself who lives on the West Coast in California, I often have to catch up to the Monday night or the Thursday night football game. I don't have to kind of scroll through my DVR to look for key plays at that moment. YouTube TV has basically used machine learning or artificial intelligence to basically annotate the timeline of when those key plays are happening, and it's basically feeding me those key play highlights so I can catch up very quickly. And that's where I think data technology will help kind of accelerate the video processing or the media workflow process into real time, to help a fan engage with a game that they might not have 3.5 hours to sit down and watch.
And actually, to add to that, like I absolutely, data is probably the great unlocker of why streaming is so much better of an experience than broadcast. You've got an opportunity to use data in so many interesting ways to augment the experience. I mean, look at Amazon Prime Video X-Ray, right? Same kind of fundamental technology, right? How can we use data about other things related to this media asset to change or evolve the experience so that people can access more content. And again, and then to Christof's point, like that could be second screen content. So I totally agree with Caleb. Data unlocks such a wonderful ability for streaming to do things in ways that people never imagined, like that predictive ability. And it's, that's one of the things that we're, from the Alliance perspective, one of the things one of our working groups is working on, open caching, from a delivery perspective, is how do you share data across all of your caching nodes, across all of your delivery networks, so that you can get a better understanding of what's happening with your video. So I mean, that's just one aspect of data. Caleb gave an example of data, but data is the underlying thing that radically changes streaming, right? Because we've seen interactivity tried before, like Mocha, OCAP, at the cable spaces, failed miserably. Now we have an opportunity to create such an incredibly richer experience around a video view, with things like what Caleb described and other ways that data and ML and AI can implement. I mean, just think about MEC and the edge cloud and 5G, and it's going to be really interesting and exciting to watch how the video experience is going to transform because of data.
Yeah, and also, like, if you think about it, it's like, of course you have like these key moments and so on, but also data can help to enhance the video stream per se. For example, if you think about what we did with Stats Perform, our partner, in a football scenario, we had like player cams. And if you think about the player cams, often it's like there's the camera focused directly on the player, and you don't really know all the time where you are at the field. But if you now have tracking data available, and you can like use the data stream, this metadata, and mark it also like for the users that watching the streams, so you can user to give him more like coordination, so that he knows like, okay, I'm now in this field, and give him like access and operability like of the application, of the experience, because otherwise it might be that you lose him, right? And then of course you can, like, if you have also those cool elements with these highlights and so on, you're not just having a live experience what you have now when you watch TV, you can easily also jump back and like rewatch a scenario, you watch a goal, like you also have like in a game, like in a football game, then where you watch it from different angles and so on, and you can easily recreate it also in the real world. And data is really a key role there.
Fair to say as well with data that it just opens the door to so many different sports, doesn't it? If you think about motor racing in particular, but also, I don't know, boxing, horse racing, there's all sorts of different areas whereby the ability to see data specific, as you say, to the particular car you want to follow, or whatever it might be, the number of bad plays has been in a tennis match or something, have that data available, it would be a game changer, wouldn't it?
Totally. Like, especially like in every sport is different. So you really need to rethink like every sports and every sports experience, like in a way, like how can data help you together with the video streams to actually deliver a meaningful experience that gives you more value than just a simple video feed. But data is definitely plays a key role there in connecting also the streams together to make like one bundled experience.
You were talking previously, Jason, about how Warner, I think it was, you were mentioning with their movie releases now being synchronized, and really people sort of beginning to recognize the value of streaming, but also the decreasing value, if you like, of live events. And just, is that going to transfer to sport? Can you see more and more sports events that would previously be a viewing experience in the stadium absolutely transferring to people's living rooms because of streaming?
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting question. I mean, I think there's something about the live sports experience that goes beyond the sport itself, right? It's about the being around other people and sharing their passion and, cheering at the same time. And then there's the experience of the stadium itself. I'd go there, I'd get my hot dog or my sausage and my beer, and I'm just chilling and kicking back and watching this and I think that never goes away. I do think that streaming enables the traditional fan experience to extend. So think about, like, one of the biggest sports brands in the world is Manchester United, right? So you've got people who are Man U fans that don't live anywhere near Man U, but they want to watch those matches and they want to experience that stadium as it's happening. And so, right now that's the television experience, right? So I'm going to watch the EPL, that match on my TV, but That's not quite the same. I think this will probably be a major game changer. So this is the new Oculus Quest 2. This is $300. So suddenly there's some apps on here like Big Screen that allow you to watch something on a screen that looks like you're in a movie theater, sitting with people, like, so you do little avatars. But the idea is that you're now sharing an experience. So I think what streaming can enable is the delivery of kind of that stadium experience to a device like that, which enables the people who can't be at the Man U match to be able to still feel like they're with other fans, cheering and enjoying and screaming, because you hear it all and you see it all within. And so just imagine that now, instead of watching a screen, you get put into the stadium, and instead of people around you, it's avatars of people around you, and you're still all cheering, yay! And you're having that experience, but it's virtually. And so I think, streaming provides that. 5G and streaming will provide that kind of experience. I think that is what we'll see, but I don't think it'll ever replace going to to a match. I mean, whenever I'm in the UK and an EPL games are happening and they're local to London, I go. Like, I'm there. Why wouldn't I go? And if I'm in Germany, and there's a Bundesliga match, I'm gonna go watch it, because I can't, I wouldn't get that experience otherwise. So yeah, so streaming does extend the fan experience from the stadium. It won't replace it, but it will create new opportunities and avenues for big sports brands and even little sports brands to capture that ethos for those that can't attend physically.
Caleb, is that where you see opportunities for Google Cloud in terms of what you can bring to that fan experience?
Absolutely. I mean, we're looking at, as Jason says, at the mobile edge. I think, other parts of Google are obviously working on augmented reality. I think, we've already, to be honest, the Bundesliga did a test last fall with using augmented reality, holding up your phone to see how fast, the players are running. We're seeing the EPLs doing that with BT today. So I think there are many ways to drive the in-venue experience, and we're working on them actively, and particularly, in the post-COVID era, hopefully, as we get into 21. I mean, I think mobile ticketing, I think at this point is up to, in the US, and 80% of tickets are coming in via the mobile phone. And if you have at least the phone number attached to that ticket, you can start basically messaging people to say, hey, it's you should show up to the venue at 7:15, or you should show up to the venue at 7:25, and we're going to stage the progression of people into the venue. Or imagine you get a text message that says, listen, everybody in even rows in section 222 is going to, please stand up and leave now. And to or use exit 23 versus door 24. We're actively working on that with teams and venue operators now. And I think there are ways to not just put that into video streaming in the venue, or imagine having a co-viewing experience with somebody that's in the venue and your friends at home, particularly for the upcoming Euros, Qatar, or the Olympics, and being able to share that experience with your friends at home. I think we're working on all of that. It's data and video at the end of the day. And at the end of the day, video is data.
Data.
Yeah.
Okay, chaps. Well, we're coming towards the end of our allotted hours, but let's just have some final thoughts from you all when just revisiting the title of the webinar about the technical challenges of delivering a broadcast live experience to any device, anywhere in the world. I don't want it to be a negative note. It's a positive note, because you seem to be all overcoming these challenges, but let's just give a bit of thought to perhaps what the single biggest challenge is for the development, so that in a few years' time we're talking about further advancements, further developments from those that we've already touched on today. But in terms of the challenges to that, Christof, let's start with you. What do you think are the biggest barriers, perhaps, if you like, to this advancement continuing?
Yeah, so I think that the biggest one is kind of like on the integration perspective, like to all bring like different devices, platforms, and so on together, because also like different companies develop different technologies and then only support that. like especially one like phone company, like always doing like a bit their own stuff, especially with the streaming standards. And then like you always have the problem that you need to do something separate, what you would do like on a large range of other devices, right? So you need to think about like how you can manage that, and then how you can manage that to integrate into existing solutions that were maybe not built with state-of-the-art technology, and you still need to integrate those, but then also like advance them with the new next level experiences. So that's kind of the challenge there, like where to put into it, and then also how to work with people and how to work with legacy systems there.
Thank you, Christof. Caleb, let's come to you now for your thoughts on this.
I'm going to say something very similar to Christof, is about that there are so many new experiences, and I think that will unlock, frankly, taking on the technical debt or the investment to build out these infrastructures. And I think it's about, I think for me at least, it's about defining that model, that monetization, that upside to encourage or inspire an organization to move to the cloud fully. And I think the challenge where we are today is we're kind of, yes, there's a lot of OTT streaming going on of sports, but we haven't fully captured all of the capabilities of the cloud. As I was saying in the beginning, the ability to bring all 30 cameras to life for the fan and drive and fan engagement. And I think the challenge is frankly getting organizations comfortable enough with the economics and the possibility of bringing all those cameras to life, because many people, it's still storytelling at the end of the day. We're still trying to engage the fan in a great story, and the beauty of sports is you never know how the story is going to end until it actually does. But I think the pandemic has helped us. I think the challenge we have to overcome is that desire to experiment and the ability to invest into that experiment, which frankly, with where the media, all the changes going on in the media industry today, the evolution, it's hard to find that capital or the investments to do that. But I think we have to work harder on showing what the customer value proposition or the fan value proposition is at the end of the day for that payoff.
Caleb, thank you very much indeed. Jason, we started with you. Let's come back to you now to close. From what you've heard, where do you see the biggest challenge falling for you?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we're a technical organization, right? So we don't deal with, monetization or business issues. We deal purely with technology. And, some of our member companies are like NBC Sports and Optus Sports. And, we have lots of sports providers and live content providers like Hulu. And so for us, when we look at the technical challenges, it's really delivery, right? And you can break that into three parts. It's reliability, consistency, and scalability. Those are all difficult to achieve. Again, back to, with the device fragmentation, when you think about broadcast, it is amazingly reliable, right? The viewer sits down on the couch, pushes the power button, the TV comes on, there's the signal, boom, done. There's no bit rate shifting, there's no static anymore because it's all digital and it's all cable. And obviously we're talking about major urban areas, not necessarily out in the rural. It can be a little more difficult. But for largely, 95% of the viewers, it's a wonderful, beautiful, consistent, stable, excellent experience. Streaming is not always like that. Our infrastructure is a little more unstable. When we are going over the open internet, it's an unmanaged network. It's why do streaming operators not provide SLAs? Why do they not say to their consumers, we're up 100% of the time? Because they can't guarantee it. Because the internet's an open internet. It's an open, unmanaged network. And so it's really difficult. That's a really difficult value proposition to say, like, let's put all of our content on streaming where, to be honest, we use the cloud. The cloud could have an outage. There could be a denial of service attack on a data center that leaks out into my infrastructure. So there are so many technical challenges still to providing, again, a great viewing experience, and it all comes down to delivery. Being able to produce a reliable service that it's always available, no matter where, no matter when, no matter what device. It's consistent, so you get the same quality every time you watch it, and it's scalable, right? So that if like what Caleb was describing with cricket, so all of a sudden there's a notification that goes out that a wicket's coming up, and the viewership goes from 1 million to 50 million. Oh, well, what does that do to quality? What does that do to reliability? What does it do to consistency? So these are still technical challenges. We will be trying to tackle these challenges for the next 2 or 3 decades. This is not a we're going to solve this overnight, but broadcasters and network operators working together and cloud providers like Google are all working with them to figure out how to ensure that. And then of course, innovation, new technologies are coming out to help fix these things. I mean, there's like one of our member companies, Broadpeak, came out with a server-side solution to predict bit rate. So you don't let the player do it because players are greedy and they will try to suck up all the available bandwidth on a device in order to deliver the highest bit rate stream, even when it's not necessary. And so maybe you put that at the server and you use ML and AI to start to predict things like that. So the new technologies are coming out, innovations coming out to help us bridge the gap between the broadcast experience and the streaming experience. And it is just a matter of time. It's going to happen.
Jason, thank you very much indeed. All three of you, it's been fantastic that you've shared your expertise and experience with us. And I'm sure everybody watching in on this ISC Academy webinar will be delighted to have had that, that they can take advantage of and share. So thank you very much indeed to Jason from Texas, to Christof from Germany, and to Caleb who's in California. Thank you very much, gentlemen, all of you.
Bye,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Thank you.